be most distinct from what they're familiar with before. When it comes to the curriculum and what students are being exposed to and what they're learning, historically what we've looked for is what courses do you require students to take, and can you show us the syllabi from those courses so we can see what they read, what kind of assignments they have, what are the topics that are being covered, largely input measures. And what we're saying now is we want to know what your students will know and be able to do when they finish your program. And we think that there are a wide range of knowledge and skills that could be appropriate for a public service program. I know those of you who've worked on trying to define the local government competencies know the challenges of trying to really hone in on, well, what do you actually expect someone to be able to do? Depends on what kind of job you're going to hire them for and what kind of, the size of your jurisdiction and the particular challenges you're facing. So certainly within the context of a program's mission, there could be a range of particular expectations or a variation of expectations for what they expect students to know and be able to do when they're all done. That said, within the framework of public service values, in the context of developing these new standards, we identified 5 domains, or what we refer to as universally required competencies. Every program seeking NASPAA accreditation needs to be able to demonstrate, within the context of their own mission, how do they prepare students to do these 5 things? How do they prepare them to have the ability to lead and manage in public governance? We did not say in government. We said in public governance, and so that leaves open the possibility, despite Scott's comments earlier, that they might choose to focus on nonprofit organizations. To participate in and contribute to the policy process, although you might expect that to look very different if a program has a focus on preparing people to work in the federal government versus local government, because the policy process and the aspects of where you can participate, how you can participate, what's required vary. To analyze, synthesize, think critically, solve problems, and make decisions. To articulate and apply a public service perspective, and this was the cultural competency component, to communicate and interact productively with a diverse and changing workforce and citizenry. So the standards define those 5 broad areas that we think are essential. You can't say that you have a program that deserves accreditation if you don't do these things. But how you do that, it depends on your own mission. And so we give these broad domain areas, as we call them, these 5 domains, and each program then has to define how do they define that for their own program, and how do they operationalize that for their own program. And there's an expectation that each one of these might include actually several different component parts. But they have to cover all 5 of these areas. That's for all programs. If they claim to have a specialization, such as a local government management track, maybe they have a nonprofit administration track, maybe they have a housing and urban development track, whatever it might be, then they need to go beyond that and identify what additional competencies are associated with that specialization or that track. Those universally required competencies, all students going through their program need to have those. But there may be more that students have to have if they choose a particular specialization area. So you expect if someone goes through this MPA program and they choose the local government specialization, that they will have some common skills and some unique skills compared to a student who went through that same MPA program but chose the nonprofit management specialization. So they'd have some things in common by virtue of the core coursework that they take and the universally required competencies, and then they'd have some things that are specific to the program. It's also possible that a program, just by virtue of its mission, may think that there's more than 5. You know, that they think they have some other competencies that all of their students need to be exposed to and need to demonstrate, regardless of what specialization they choose, and they can't find a way to fit it in those 5 categories. So they can have more than the 5. They have to cover those 5 areas, and then if they have specializations, they have to articulate some additional competencies for those specialization areas. define their program as, we serve a largely pre-service student population seeking entry-level positions in any number of public service settings. We're kind of providing that generic public management approach. Or maybe we're preparing people for local government, and what they do is for each of those 5 areas, they define their competencies in ways that are specific to local government, those 5 areas, that, yes, they could stop at those 5. If they have specializations, they need to have more. And if they have a local government specialization, if they claim to have a local government specialization, then what they need to be referring to are the document that this group, some members in this room, along with some people from the NASPAA Local Government Education Committee, put together as suggested competencies for the local government track. And that was intended to be a tool for those programs so that they wouldn't all have to sit around and reinvent the wheel. That's okay. It's all new language.
It's new language. And I know that some things are only required if you go down a certain path. And I know that we're not supposed to think in terms of inputs.
We don't ignore inputs, but we want more than that.
Would this suggest that students could go through, get a master's degree from an accredited university, never having taken a budget class, a personnel class?
No. Because how could you lead and manage in public governance if you didn't know how to manage personnel? Realistically. How could you say that, with an MPA program, you say you're preparing people for local government, for them to analyze, synthesize, think critically.
The local government competency, if you get down to the elective,
which for some programs will be
voluntary,
elective.
you have to offer the budgeting and personnel. But I'm talking about if you choose not to market yourself as having a specialization, you're just a universally, all things to all people MPA program.
The burden would be on the program to say that they've defined these and they can persuade COPRA that in the absence of a human resource management component and a budgeting and finance component, that they actually have students who can lead and manage in government, who can make decisions and solve problems.
Well, there's a lot of programs in the country that don't require one or of those courses to get through the MPA.
I would agree that. And still under...
Oh yeah, no, they're accredited program.
They do not have to have courses. Even under the old standards, no program had to have a course in budgeting. No program had to have a course in human resource management. No program has to have a course in democratic processes. No program, but we never specified courses. What we specified is content before, and what we specify now are competencies. How they go about doing that is up to the program. They could have courses that are just called basic management, intermediate management, advanced management, and maybe they have components of human resource management in each of those, and they have components of budgeting and finance in each of those, and they have components of any number of other topics. How they deliver is entirely up to the program. But they have to demonstrate that the students can do these things when they're done.
When I look at those those items look like outcomes to me.
Mm-hmm.
But the way you described it at the very beginning is we want to know what kinds of things you're doing for your students so that they'll have those. Those are inputs.
Right, and we want to see the connection.
So what I'm trying to understand is how do you measure those things to be able to know whether the students coming out of the program actually possess those characteristics?
That is the challenge that is creating the most anxiety for our programs. And we give them a lot of examples.
But that's the only thing that this is about.
Right. And so we give them a lot of examples. So for example, to analyze, synthesize, think critically, solve problems, and make decisions. The program might say, we expect that every student before graduation will be able to demonstrate that they can take data, enter it into, you name the software package, or they can give a list of optional software, calculate the following types of statistics, interpret those, and present that in a report that could be used by an elected body to make